Hey everyone, welcome to the Sonic Truth. And today we have a special guest with us, mixing and mastering engineer, Alberto De Icaza. Welcome,
Hi,
my
everyone.
man.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here with you guys.
Hey, thanks for coming on and joining the audio chat that we have here.
Yeah, I know we have a mutual friend, Steve Shady. He hit us up. He's like, "You got to get Alberto on."
Yes.
We're like, "Okay, we're gonna do it."
Yeah, we have a lot of friends in common that keep talking to me about this. Like Sam Pura, I'm very close with him.
Oh,
Same
nice.
with Cody Simpson. He has a studio that's maybe like 30 minutes away from here. And I keep making fun that it's like a showroom for Audioscape gear because, like, I think you're just missing a decomp. Everything else is here. You know.
Got to get the decomp.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Pokemon.
Right?
Got to catch them all. But no, yeah, the decomp. Seriously, that's a beast. You know, there's nothing like that. No, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
I've been eyeing it. I definitely want to get one.
Now, do you have any current Audioscape gear yet, or have you just been able to listen to it?
I don't. And actually, like, I just saw the email that you guys are doing bundles. I'm like, man, because I definitely want to get the 260. I heard it at NAM when, you guys had like a little demo there, and I was like blown away by it. So I'm definitely looking at that and the decomp and the LA3As. It's very close to my heart just because so I learned mixing from Producer Machine and from Will Putney. And so I learned on his rig. And when he was working at that time, he was doing LA3s for guitars and like a couple distressors. And so, he moved to In the Box ever since. And I kind of went the opposite way. I was in the box when I was not mixing on his rig. And I like little by little started putting, new pieces. And the LA3As were that thing that got discontinued right as I was on that transition, and like prices shoot up. And I was never able to get a pair that was, somewhat affordable. I was like, I don't want to just pay the money for an original one just because, just for the name. Like, I actually want a nice unit. So when I saw you guys like recreated it a couple of years ago, I was like, yes, this is awesome. And they look so fucking cool. Like, this is killer, So yeah, I'm definitely gonna chat after this with you guys about that.
You're in the market for one, man.
It's funny how like the LA3s, people don't. It's still like they don't realize they're so good on guitars. Like some people still gravitate maybe towards a 160 VU or something like that. Lloyd, who runs sound front of house for Young the Giant, he came into our room here and he worked on this desk for like the whole day, and he was like just sold that he was going to go with the 160 VU. And as soon as he heard the DA3A, he got two of them for both guitar players.
Yeah, man, there's something magical they do with the mids. Like there's like little presence that they add, even when you're just hitting like 1 or 2 dBs of compression. It just kind of pushes everything to the front in a very nice way,
Yeah.
And I haven't been able to find like anything else that kind of does that in that like magical way. Everything has their own flavor, but there's just something about them on guitars that is just like, yes, it's familiar. This is, it sits
That's
right
the
to
sound.
me.
Yeah, the mid range, just like it's rich, but it almost brightens without becoming offensive in a way. Like is how I describe it. Just like it sort of livens and brightens everything up, and in a way that's like how you would expect. You've heard it on a million records, like you mentioned.
Right.
So I got to ask, how did you evolve to become a mastering engineer?
So I started working with Machine and Will Putney. This was in 2009, 2010. We were in New Jersey at the time. And, I started like an intern, started just like a runner. At the time, Will used to be Machine's engineer, and he was getting pretty busy. So Machine desperately needed an engineer, and I was there just learning from them. So I kind of made my way into that opportunity of like, okay, I can track, I'll start getting my own projects, but at the same time, I'm working on this awesome, project. Like we had like Clutch come through and like Miss May I, We Came as Romance. Like,
nice.
So I definitely had an amazing learning experience with talented musicians. Not a lot of people can say that. And just having a mentor was great. So I did that with Machine for a bit. Then we decided to move to here to Austin, Texas in 2014. We built a barn studio. It's right outside of Austin. It's a beautiful place. And I was tracking there at the time I started doing more of my own projects. And And it was a little trickier to get bands in there for me. And I was kind of like soul searching, like, what do I really want to focus in? I enjoy mixing a little bit more. I got married, and, it's also like just putting all the time, like, it's so tough. And I live somewhat far from the studio too. So it was like, I never see my fiance at the time. Like, it was tough. So I was like, you know what? I kind of want to start my own mixing place, and just figure out life. So I decided I'm just going to start with mixing and mastering. That's what I do. That's what I know. I enjoy it. And people kept hiring me for mastering more than mixing. Like, at first I had a couple mixing projects and whatnot, but then just through online communities and whatnot, I met a lot of friends that trusted me, and were like, yeah, you finish our records. Like, you know how to make them good. And so through that, and I started working with some indie artists. And a lot of them are very, they pretty much do everything in house. And then you're just finishing stuff for them, right? So you'll just get mixing stems sometimes, or like almost like stem mastering, right? Like, they'll just give you like, here's my drums, here's my vocal stem, here's like guitars and like synths, and just finish up the mix and like master it, and that's that. So that kind of just became a thing too, where I was like, well, I mean, it's technically not mixing, but it kind of is. It's a weird space. And that just led to more mastering stuff. And then around 2020, I was working with these managers that were doing some indie bands. And at the time, they started managing Lionsgate's label. So they hit me up and they were like, we're doing this YouTube original show. It's hip hop. I don't know if you work on hip hop. It's just a mastering gig. And I was like, I mean, sure, I'll give it a shot, So they were like, we'll send you a track. The producer's going to listen to it. If he likes it, you get the record. And they sent me one track that the producer made just so that I could kind of match it. Like, he mastered it, and he was like, he's going to be on the record, so we got to make sure that, that these two are going to sound okay. And it's like, sure, fine. We'll roll with it. So they sent me the tracks. It's for a show called Step Up. Side note, especially at the time, I was completely ignorant to hip hop, right? I grew up with like metal and rock. I grew up in Mexico City. So it just it never got to me. So like, I know some of the bigger artists, but I was not deep in the trenches, especially with R&B. Like, that just flew over me, right? So they sent me this artist. I mastered the song and I send it on their way. Then they tell me, yeah, the producer is Timbaland. And I was like, oh, I know that one.
Yes.
Like, it has to be big. And my wife came back from work and I told her what happened. She's like, well, who was the artist? It's like, I have no idea. Some dude named Neo. She's like, wait, what? It's like, look it up. Pull your Spotify and look it up. It's like, oh, shit. Like, this is serious, right? And I ended up getting that record. And from there, I started doing a lot of soundtracks for them, and kind of making a partnership with Lionsgate, where I work on a lot of their soundtracks. And that just opened mastering in a completely different level, right? Because from before being very niche with rock and alternative, metal kind of bands, now it was like all across the board. It could be hip hop one day, the next day there's classical music, then the next day is like atmospheric, like horror shows. Like, it's just literally all over the place. And that helped me kind of hone my mastering craft a lot, just because you learn little things from different genres, right? Like, just working in metal, you get all these tricks on like how to control stuff, how to make it loud without it just being super boomy, right? And then I get hip hop and I'm like, well, I know how to do this over there. If I apply the same logic, these guys might love it because I can make it sound aggressive and loud and not just like kind of like distorted and boomy, right? Like a lot of the Atlanta hip hop is sounding now. So I kind of started doing that crossover and it worked. Like, people like what I do on the mastering side. So yeah, I just kind of established myself that way.
Wow. So you were applying the tips and tricks that you had learned doing heavy rock metal music, and you applied that to the urban side of music.
Right.
And it came out great. That's phenomenal, because that's two different ends of the spectrum, especially when you're approaching it from a mixing perspective, and I imagine from a mastering as well.
For sure. And it's interesting because, when you look at rock, and especially metal, it's very dense on the mids. And hip hop is the opposite, is very dense on the low end. And there's a big hole in the mids. So just being able to like know how to work, how to make space on certain areas, like it just translates to everything. Like it's pretty interesting to see the world through that lens. You know, once you have to work on different genres, it's like, oh, this is more. You know, there's more similarities than I thought there would be here. And
Yo, that's
and
pretty
that
heavy. Your first gig was with Timbaland. I mean, I don't think you can get much bigger than
yeah, right.
that in terms of hip hop.
Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
That is cool, and it's cool to switch it up too. So it's great, and you brought this up. That's everything sort of it does cross over and go together. You know, like we see that with the tools that we make. It's any genre can use an LA3. You know, like we just spoke about earlier.
or like an SSL comp. It's like across the board. I don't know one genre that doesn't have like an SSL style compressor on their mix bus or somewhere in the chains. Like,
that's what makes it exciting, being able to switch it up. And for us, even just having people reach out that are from that genre or this genre or just all over the place. It's just so general purpose. It's really before I used to just build guitar pedals back in the day, and that's a very specific market. So having to be able to interact and converse with a bunch of different people from different backgrounds and all that. It's a lot of fun for us too, doing the same thing. That's cool. You get to switch it up because that way it stays fresh for you, you're not doing the same thing every day.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's very exciting. Just working with people in different genres, personalities are very different. And I mean, I love it. It's very surprising sometimes, like, working with some composers that are, I'm like, you can manage an entire orchestra and make these beautiful pieces, but on the technical side, like, there's nothing, right?
There's nothing there, right?
Trust their engineers, and it's like, yeah, you got this. And on metal, like, there's the complete opposite, right? A lot of these guys are like super advanced. They like self-produce. They know stuff, and their notes will be like, yeah, I want like 0.5 dB, less 2K. And it's like, it's different worlds, man. It's crazy, but it's a lot of fun.
Now, in recent years, I've, how frequently, let me rephrase that, of all the clients that come in and ask for mastering, what percentage would you say are wanting to do the stem mastering? Because that's something that's been relatively new in the past 5, 6, 7 years.
It's definitely been less now. Like, I would say like not even 5% of the last 2 years.
Good.
Yeah, I'm getting more, but at the same time, I feel like I'm working with more producers that actually know how to mix. And it's less those artists that are just doing their stuff and just kind of moving from writing sessions to their demo to now it's the final version and you finish it. Now I'm getting a lot of stuff that's more developed. So I definitely see very few of it. I'll see more of it too whenever there's problems to fix. I'm that guy that, people just come with a lot of like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, I have this problem. And I'm like, just give it to me. I'll figure it out. So like there was a record that I had where the singer wasn't happy with the vocal tuning and there was a fallout with the producer. So they gave me stems and they were like, can you like figure out how to tune these couple words that are bothering me and like, match the original mix? Like, sure. I mean, we have the stems. Like we can do that and just master and put it out. Like, but now usually those stem mixes are more like there's an issue in there that I have to figure out, and it just by default just falls into stem mastering.
Yeah, because there was quite a while, like in 2018, 19, a lot of people came up with this concept of, just master the stems. The drums sound great. The guitars sound great. Just give it to them. And my thought process is like, well, how are you going to get the summing proper? You know what I mean? From that point of view. And I imagine that had to have been, because you're almost mixing also at that point in time.
Right.
When you have the stems.
It makes sense for certain bands, because like you say, how are you going to get the summing right? Well, that's the beauty of it, because these guys are just tracking everything on like, their small interfaces, and they don't really have anything to sweeten stuff out before it gets summed. So they can give it to me and I can put, I'll put their drums through like maybe through a pair of distressors, and I'll sum everything through like a dangerous bus, and then have like a nice analog chain for the mix. So my mix bus is going to sound way better than what they have in an untreated bedroom that a lot of times they just had no idea what they were doing, right? So
Good
like in
point.
those situations, I feel like that's where it's great. Um, and I feel like also since then, since like 2018 or so, um, companies like yours have been really good at allowing people that don't have, $4,000 to buy a compressor. Like let's say your SSLG, right? It was so unattainable for a lot of people that now that's not the case because you guys have an option that is very affordable and it's really good. A lot of these guys are like, oh, I can start putting stuff on my mix bus and make it sound so much better. And you can hear the depth and you can hear all this stuff. Like it's exciting. Um, so yeah, I feel like that's also part of it. Why we're seeing a little bit less of that, except for Atmos. I don't master on Atmos, but those guys are getting sessions basically, and
Yeah.
it's chaotic to me. I don't
Yeah, I
want
can
to do
imagine
with
that.
it.
Surround was enough. Now I got to bring in Atmos up to 128 plus channels.
Right.
Now, how frequently do you have to call a client back and be like, give me more headroom?
It depends. I usually work a lot with the mixers. It's interesting with a lot of composers. They just trust you, right? Like they'll send you stuff and they're like, here it is, and then what you give back, they love it. Very rarely they have notes, and the notes that they have usually are little things that it's very tweakable. Like can we automate like maybe this a little bit? It's sticking out too much in this section, like kind of stuff like that. That's very doable, especially on like classical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to like punk, for example, or I've been getting a lot of these indie artists that are, I don't want to say it's like metal, but it's more like aggressive indie. It's full of distortion and they like to blow stuff up, right? And the way that they mix it is they mix it loud because it sounds cool. Like all that distortion sounds great when your track is loud. So with them, like I understand that, and a lot of times, like I'll work on the master, and I'm like, hey, dude, like push this back because I can beat it better than how you're beating it right now. So if you give me more headroom, we can do that. Or from the beginning, since they send me a lot of them send me their mixes just to kind of get some feedback before I get the finished mix. So if I hear stuff like that, I'm always like, dude, just print two of them. Give me one how you like it, and give me one with a little more headroom, like maybe take out whatever. If you're using like a limiter at the end, or if your compression is like going insane, like just dial it back in and give me a version without it, and I'll just give them an A and B version. I usually never tell them what they are. I'm like, here, pick A or B, and like let your ears decide. But yeah, I mean, and I like that. I like working. A lot of the mixers I work with have my phone number, and I'll send them some stuff. And like, listen to it. I'm here in the studio. Just text me, call me. We can tweak stuff together. I have no problem going 10 times on a song if that's gonna make it better. Like, happy to do that stuff.
Yeah, it's important to have that communication with the mix engineer. I think a lot of times, mix engineers will ask the client, well, who masters it? And then they just give them the files and then they step away. So I think it's cool that you're embedded with them during the process.
Yeah, that's important.
And it's interesting too that happens a lot with like mid-level producers to, I would say like a middle-class producer, if you want to call it that, right? Because the moment you have huge artists, the communication chain is insane. It's like I have to send it to a manager. The manager is going to send it to the artist. The artist might talk with a mixer, and then the mixer is going to come back, and then the manager is going to come to whoever could hire me. And it's just like an email chain of 5 people to say, oh, it's fine. For stuff that I'll hear, right? Like, there's been stuff that I'm like, I'm hearing pops and clicks here. Like, can we check on that? By the time that it goes to them and it comes back to me, and it's usually like, it's fine. We're not going to the studio to fix that. So I've kind of just, a lot of times I'll just, go into RX, fix all the stuff that I hear. And I'm like, hey, here's your version. Here's my version with everything I patch. If you want to fix the mix, cool. Do it, send it to me. But if not, we're not going to waste, 4 days in the ether of emails to get an answer.
Yeah, I can imagine that can elongate the process when there's that many people involved.
Yeah, too many chefs. It's tough. Yeah.
Now, is there a difference? You've done a lot of television, right? In terms of mastering music for television or
So
film?
I master the soundtracks. What they use on the movies and on the TV, a lot of times because they're doing surround, Atmos, etc., they'll give stems to them. And
Gotcha.
so they just don't master. They just kind of go for it with their mixes, and whoever is mixing the movie just sweetens it up a
Throws it
little,
in there.
I'm imagining. But it's rare that the tracks that I master end up on the actual, especially for movies. For TV, I think it might not be the case, but for movies, it's definitely like it's a completely different format. So they just like don't even bother. There's been one composer that sat down with me and he was like, "Dude, I love what you did here, and I wish this was on the movie. Like, how can we do that to all the stems that we send them? You know." So I'm waiting for his next movie so we can kind of experiment with that a little bit and see if, we can master whatever I think it's like 6 or 8 stems that they're giving the movie mixer.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Wow.
Now, is there a difference in the LUFS level? Like when you're approaching to send somebody a master that's for television or for film compared to somebody who's distributing it through music? Is there a difference in the master level that you have to send them?
For sure, because when it comes to like Atmos especially, like their loops are like, so I think like they want like -18. It's pretty, it's pretty tough. And that's part of why I'm like conflicted with that format. But I mean, it's all across the board. I always try to make it sound good by ear, and then we'll look at the numbers. With, some records, like you just have to slam it. Like, I did one with Sampura where it was for Spirit World. Great band, right? And it's aggressive. It's like Slayer meets spaghetti western.
Hell yeah.
But we wanted it. Like his mixes were loud, and what the band like is like it slammed. Like the thing was insanely loud. So it's like, well, let's do a master that sounds that loud, but it still feels somewhat dynamic, and that's like always a challenge, right? And then you get the complete opposite side on, like, for example, I did the Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
And on that side, the composer, Stephanie Economou, she's really good at making stuff very dynamic. And there's space that I have to respect, right? So I kind of want to, like, the way that I describe what I do with a lot of the soundtracks is like the difference between watching a movie in a TV and like the theater, right? Like you go to the movies and it's like stuff sounds super wide and huge. It's tall. Like there's so much depth. And that's kind of what I'm chasing when I'm mastering a song. Like I want the mix to be like what you saw on your TV on that VHS, right? And by the time you hear the master, it's like, oh shit, like, yeah, this feels big and like, shiny. So with a lot of that stuff, it's like we gotta be able to have a lot of range. And the quiet parts have to be quiet. Like I can just blast stuff, right? Because especially when there's like a crescendo or something, like we want that to feel like overwhelming. And that part has to be loud, but I don't want that to be squashed because the rest of the song was like too quiet. So a lot of times now I'm like, I don't care about the loops. I don't care. I'm not going to look at the meters until it feels right to me. And then once I hit that, I can look at it and compare it and be like, okay, now it's time to go against other songs and like start checking, am I too quiet? Am I too loud? But I know it feels right here. Like this piece is great level here. Then we'll figure out how it's going to sit in playlists and whatnot.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's got to be all feel. You don't want to be, we talk about it too much, a visual mixer, right? Looking at everything. And
right.
As Vance Powell said, we spoke with him last week. He's like, people are listening at music now. They're not listening to it. So I love that approach on how you do that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Vance is great. Like the man will turn knobs, upside down and like be like, it sounds good. Like, I don't care what it looks like. I mean, you guys are experts at 1176. All the wrong ways to use an 1176 are the best ways to use an 1176, right?
Yeah. And we also know,
I'm sure, when it was designed, like if those designers could like look at what we're doing, they'll have a heart attack. But it sounds great when you distort them. It sounds great when you blast all the buttons, and it sounds great when it's pegged, It just does what it is.
It's fun. Yeah. And the headroom in the analog domain's a whole different ballgame too. So,
absolutely.
You can slam these analog devices. pretty much as you want for the most part without them, you know, taking a crap on you. So it's, it's
They're
a lot
very
of fun.
forgiving.
Yeah, extremely. And that's part of the charm, you know. The you know, it's funny, you mentioned knowing everything about the uses of a 1176, but also just knowing just every little deficiency in the circuit, knowing just, you know, learning. I even mentioned, like, you know, the reason why we drop new products the way we do is like because we're still, it's like taming a wild horse or something, you know, like you're sort of gaining your footing with everything that it can throw at you at the, you know, at the beginning stage. So it's because there is a lot, these circuits, they have a lot of quirks, you know, they're not,
Absolutely.
that's the charm about them too. So it's like, we want to make sure we, you know, perfectly replicate those quirks. And, you know, if there's anything that's just offensive though, we really, you know, we don't go down that path, but yeah, it's definitely a labor of love, just like what you're doing. So
Absolutely. And, you know, speaking of that, I've been very hell-bent on this lately, but I feel like the sentiment on the industry right now is we're very precious about, you know, the way the circuit is made and what, like, you have companies that are like figuring out what wire the transformer was wound with to make an exact replica of what it was. But then you go to all these studios and every 1176 sounds different, you know. Every LA2A sounds different. You try to match them and it's like, it's not going to happen. And, you know, for 40, 50 years, techs were just servicing with what they had around. So, you know, if it is shit, cool, I'll open it up and, well, maybe this, you know, this resistor might be a little value off, but it's good enough. Put it in there. And that made gear special, right? Like, you talk to all these old guys that have crazy collections of gear and they're all like, yeah, this one sounds great. I never touch it. Like, that's the one. And I've never been able to do that. And it's the same with amps, you know. There's so many little things that I keep saying, like, oh, you got to get this and you got to get this model. Like, dude, so many happy accidents. And that's part of the beauty of analog gear. It's never going to sound the same. Once you found one that's magical, like, that's it. You know, there was something in there.
Nail on the head. Like, yeah, totally. Like, embrace those variances. You know, that's what we literally you do, because you mentioned why they all sound different is those tolerances. Those parts have wide tolerances. So they're just gonna, you know, they're gonna swing. It's gonna swing. And then, you know, over time, you know, a lot of those parts they use, especially, you know, the 50s, 60s carbon composition resistors, they drift up over time. They change their values. So they didn't sound the same. Like, something from 1960 does not sound the same as it did when it came off the line, you know? Right. So
somebody was telling me about the LA2As that the Opto cell has a life shelf. And a lot of the vintage ones, like, that life is gone, right? So that's part of why you can't find two that are the same, because they drifted so much that each one of them is unique in its own way based on how much it was used.
Yeah, the panels die. That's the first thing that usually takes a dump in the opto cell is the EL panel, like the back of, you know, the light in the like back of your phone or whatever, if you want to think about it that way.
Right.
It's hitting those two photocells. And I used to, when I started building, like, you know, point-to-point LA2As for myself and that, and what ended up becoming like the God model for our opto is I started cracking open those vintage ones, and I would see that, this panel's tired, or this one's completely dead, and I'd see all sorts of weird stuff they were trying back then that nobody even talks about. Like, they had like a third photocell tacked on the one that was doing compression to make it a little bit faster. So it wasn't even matching up between output and meter mode and all this other stuff. They didn't give a shit back then. They just, you know, they just
got that extra part, throw it in.
Yeah. So it was fun to learn all that, and then also see how, like, the newer ones people are building, how they're different. And like, every old one I cracked open had like a carbon comp 2M2 resistor right across the panel. Then all the, like, the newer ones that, like, the JBL era, we call them, when JBL owned, you know, Yuri.
Yeah.
And they just had a cap coming off one of the 2 pins. That's how everybody makes them, just because that's like the traditional way that people know now. But all the old ones I cracked open to just have that resistor across the panel. Oh. So it's like, to me, it's common sense. Just build it like they did with the parts that they did, and, you know, accept that there's going to be variances, and and then mitigate against anything that's an outlier in the final QC stage. So you train people that have the ear that go, oh no, this sucks, kick it back,
Right.
if something's out of spec. It's just, if that's what you're going for, then do it. It's just like vinyl versus like, some other sort of hi-fi, way of looking at it. And analog gear like this to me is like vinyl,
Yeah.
Right, for sure. I just did a record with Crowbot, and so the guitar player and I are best friends. He lives like a mile away from my house, so he's here all the time, and we're both super nerds about guitar amps and pedals and stuff, right? So this record, we kind of wanted to do something fussy, and we're like, well, let's explore big muffs. And I have a Russian black that is pretty cool. He was like, yeah, let's start with that, And at some point in the record, when we started tracking guitars, we had 2 black Russians, a green Russian, a New York one, and like 2 or 3 different brands, like, Crook Devices Hoofer, and we had a Swollen Pickle and stuff. And we kind of started going like, okay, this is the same circuit in theory, right? Through all its versions. Even the black Russians that were very close, like they sounded very different. And at some point I opened them up just to tinker with stuff and figure out like why, right? Very different parts. And I looked into the history of it, and even at that factory, when they were doing that before they came to America, they were literally just going by what they had in stock. So the values are all somewhat around there, but especially with some resistors and some capacitors are like, you could have this one, you can have this one, or you can have this one. They all sound different, right? But to me, that's part of the magic of analog gear. Knowing like, okay, this one sounds cool, like, awesome. I got one. I got lucky, right? Or find the stuff that sounds great. Like you said, like if you're gonna like figure out a schematic, figure out one that sounds good and it was built right, and that will make a huge difference.
Yeah, and using those parts, if you're gonna try and do that, using the parts that they use, you don't have to get as molecular as the wire and the transformer,
Right.
but I mean general parts like like in a tube circuit, carbon composition resistors sound different than metal films, so there's this fear with designers nowadays in tube circuits, or they just want everything so precise that they sacrifice, in my opinion, what could be a cool tone box by just putting that resistor in there, or it is cheaper, it's a specialty resistor. So yeah, I mean there's that too, but it just, it's cool that everything sounds a little different. As long as it sounds great, and then you get that thing that's a little different, that's your own special piece unique to you. So that's cool too.
There's also like the big difference between gear that's been made or designed by audio engineers versus gear that's been designed by electrical engineers that is like mathematically right, but doesn't sound right,
Sonically, it's off.
Yeah, I've tried to become over the years more a bridge between those two worlds, is where like, sort of taking, inspiration from Rick Rubin and how he approaches his, producer style versus, with this particular area and just, asking yourself honest questions, as you prototype something, what's the end user going to like? It's important to get people that can beta test for you as well, but number one, you have to be able to put your stamp on it and say that this is, this is badass. Yeah, people are going to love this, at the end of the day, that's everything, And the same goes with your masters and whatever mixes you're doing as well. So
yeah, for sure. Like people hire you because of your work, like there's something about it. You want the person, and that's also why I'm looking at all the AI and people are terrified. I'm like, it's soulless, man. People are working with you because of what you do, not because of the program you're using, the tools you're using. Like it's you.
Yeah. And if that simplifies a workflow for someone that's going to get, be able to give them more of themselves of something legit and real, they're going to recognize, bullshit for bullshit, at the end of the day. So anyone who's serious about what they're doing. So yeah, no, that's awesome. I also wanted to say, I know you mentioned Sam, Sam, I saw you were repping Kive audio on your website as well.
I love Ed. He's the man.
Dude, we had Ed on a while. We had Sam on, and we had Ed on last year, I think.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, such a cool guy. And the plugins are awesome. And I think there's no one that's working as hard as Ed in that game right now. In the plugins, right? Like, he's just, if somebody wants something different, he's like a guy taking requests. Like, he's killing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing about Ed. He takes feedback pretty good. Like, he sends it to so many people. Like, I love testing all his plugins, and he's like, okay, well, what do you like? What's not good? He'll chat with you for a long time about all the stuff, like all the nuances. It's like, oh yeah, this could use like maybe a button here to, like his new EQ, the Focusrite one, right? It's incredible. I love it. Like, this is like something I've wanted for a while, dude. I'm like, I just want one request. I want an in and out button so I can turn the EQ off and on and hear what's happening, right? Like, with little changes. It's like, oh yeah, that's a cool idea. I'm like, awesome. And he released it, and there it is. Like, so stuff like that I love about him. He's so smart. Like, he's got a great ear. Yeah.
And like he takes feedback so well, and not everybody does, like he can really, like, it's just like, yeah, okay. And that's rare to get that today. So it's been, the feeling is mutual about Ed. Like, it's been such a pleasure working with him, with how his ethos lines up with ours, with everything, make something right. If it's not right, let's make it right. All of that, and I think he's knocked it out of the park with all of the Kive audio plugins. He's done Sam's stuff. He's done the Audioscape plugins as well.
Right.
And they're killer. And people really, what I like about them is they're not just there to be there. They're actually, there's, a point to these plugins that fills a hole or a void in each area,
Yeah, for sure. He's interesting because he's looking at gear that's not, it's like, it's not, everybody's doing that one, right? Like, there's 35 plugins of this one, and he's just looking for like cool stuff that is somewhat obscure, but everybody's like, oh yeah, I remember this. Like, this was awesome. Like, why is it not like more, more available in plugin world? So,
yeah.
Well, Ed, he'll make it happen.
Yeah, no, he will. And yeah, it's like the reverb, like, he's even the V-Comp. That's one where we, that's a little bit more modern. There's a few plugins like that, but I feel like the way we did that with the stay level style comp, where there's a whole story behind it, and the idea with the dual plugins where you can switch between one and the other is like, it's sort of like there's an educational aspect about like how the company evolved with the product and all that going on, where we used original new old stock 6386s in the V-Comp with the not as attractive meter, right?
Right.
And so that one, we sent to Ed, had that, and it had, the old meter, and it's got like new old stock 6V6s, everything's new old stock in it.
Right.
So, and then at a certain point, the stock just ran dry of good 6386s. They were just, you're spending $170 for that one tube, and it's microphonic, it's not usable in a circuit, and it's being a small boutique company is just going to kill you buying 10 of them or whatever it is, in a batch. So we moved on to the new production JJ tube, which we use a lot of new old stock, like 90% new old stock in everything we do, but there's a few things that we have to use new production on. That's one of them. So almost had to like rework the circuit around that to make it work. And that's what ended up becoming like the V-Comp Plus after about a year of testing. So, cool. And to have that be able to like just switch and a plug in between the two of those, I think is kind of cool.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Especially because now a lot of people are learning by themselves. I feel like the entry barrier is very low money-wise. So plugins is a great way to learn kind of what gear you like, what character you like. And then if you're interested in the analog world, go buy it, There's great options for it. But yeah, we can try anything in the digital world right now for, $100, $200. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. It's exciting though, like, because I feel like it's for us, with not charging $4,000 on a compressor, right. That's we charge around $1,000. For us, it's really cool that people can become educated on those in the digital form. And I feel like more people are learning about, say, like, you know, an LA2A, LA3A from these plugins. And then they're going to want, at some point, they're, you know, if you're making music, this is your baby, you love this, you're going to want the best you can get for it.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
It's just, yeah.
I definitely compare it to a lot like with guitars. I don't remember who I was having this conversation with, but you know, everybody was very pissed about Behringer kind of copying these signs and putting all this stuff out. Like, listen, man, the way that I see it is like kids learning guitar. Your first guitar is not going to be a very expensive Les Paul, right? You're going to go pick up a $100 Squire or an Epiphone that's like super cheap. And then once you get some love for it, you'll be like, okay, yeah, I get it. This is an intro guitar. I can sell it. And then I can go get something nicer and then keep going up until, you know, you either love your Les Paul or become a lawyer or a doctor and buy a $30,000 PRS. But in that process, there's gear, you know, for every step of the way. And I love that that's a thing now with gear, right? If you're a kid starting in your bedroom and you're like, yeah, I mean, I just want to record my demos. Sure. Grab yourself a warm audio like compressor or like a Behringer compressor. Figure out, learn what you like about that. And then you're going to outgrow it at some point. You'll be like, I want something more professional. That's when they can look at you guys and be like, oh, yeah, this is, you know, the parts here are going to be incredible. This is going to be so much better, and kind of keep moving up.
No, that's an excellent way to put it. And yeah, I think that's funny that people view that in a negative way with, you know, but it's good to have entry level products like you mentioned. You know, it is. It's at a certain point, you know, you can, with the entry level products, you can make I think that's almost sometimes though where the debate between plugins and hardware, you know, like where people are like, oh, the plugins, you know, can approximate the hardware, but maybe their only experience with hardware is that, you know, when you hear that going on. So there's definitely something different, you know, like it's funny we sell a lot of hardware to people that only have experience with plugins, and they're so used to their meter just going right up there on 1176. It's like, no, dude, it's like, meter drift, it's a discrete meter circuit. It's supposed to just sort of slide up there. That's like part of what it is. Like, you know, but I want it to go to zero.
It's not ones
just
and
like
zeros.
my plugin. I'm like, no. So we have to, you know, there is sometimes with that a little bit of an education process. And, you know, we've all been there. I was there, you know, we've all been at that point where, you know, so it's important to remember that when you sometimes get that email and, you know,
For sure.
and remind yourself we've all been there, you know.
So what is your current signal flow? What is your signal chain that you currently use for mastering?
So for mastering, I have to, like I break it in two, right? Depending on how much character the mix has and how, let's say how much depth it has, I try to either be very transparent, or if the opposite is the case, where I feel like the mix is a little bit stale or it needs like some help, then I'll go into the analog world and put a lot of color into it. So if I'm going to put some color into it, I have an NTI EQ3. Then I go into a C2, and I'll do a Rupert Neve, the Master Pro Transformer. That thing is killer. And so that's like that's like my color section, right? Like I'm making this sound good. And then I have a second stage where I want tools that are extremely transparent, and I'm just going to use them to either kind of like tilt stuff out, balance maybe my low end if I have to. And then I use two sets of limiters. One is kind of just to give me volume, and the other one is to move the song and articulate it in a way that I see it like a balance. If I want to get loud, if I just have a limiter that gets loud, what it's going to do is whatever is loudest in the song is going to get crushed, right? And it's not going to feel like the song is moving anymore. So I have a multiband limiter that it's moving sections independently in a way, like, for example, my low end is faster, right? Because I know that low end takes a lot of space in your mix. So if I can dip it, whatever is like going up really fast, it's giving me that much headroom where if I need to get loud, I can get louder, and you're not going to feel the difference of like, oh, where's my sub? Still very present. It's still there in your face. But now I can get louder and it doesn't sound like it's slammed, right? It's still moving because your low end is moving with me. So it's like a balance of those two things that I do. I try to stay in the box for that just because I literally want to stay as clean as possible. And when it comes to limiters, I feel like because I want them to be so fast, a lot of the plugins are better at doing that. And I just want to be transparent at that stage. So anything before that, it's definitely like I want some color. That's why I'm very interesting on that, on the decomp, because that, I mean, I was talking with Ed about it, and it's like it's a color box. Like it's a cool compressor that has a character. So yeah, I'm definitely like very interested in that.
Yeah,
The decomp.
Yeah, the decomp.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just nothing like it. We have mastering engineers using them. We have, obviously mixers, just drummers buy it just because they want to just crush the shit out of their drums. Right. It's just, there's so many. I mean, I remember one of the first groups that bought it, they were actually using it for just an out mode on distorting their vocals. There's so many cool little uses for it. And I feel like that's been one of the toughest products for us over the years to get right, just because it was not designed to be like a mass-produced product. It was designed for that one studio, and they just designed it for their in-house. So the original was unbalanced. Mm-hmm. So there's all this stuff going on the front end of the circuit that, like, honestly, it kicked my ass for years just trying to get it just right, where I was like, and I feel like right now we're finally, let's just put it this way. For years, I didn't even want to sell the decomp because it was that much of a pain in the ass. Right. So now we're to a point where I'm like, yeah, let's sell them. But I think you got them somewhat figured out, it's like, but yeah, a lot of times it does not take that long, 5 years to get comfortable with the circuit where it's like, is there going to be another curveball around the road,
I can see that because at the period when that was designed, like, engineers were just trying to do with whatever they had around them. I remember talking with one of the Neve reps, like this was a long time ago. And the new Neve stuff, like it was like the Portico stuff was out and it was very clean, right? So it was like, why are you guys shifting away from like the Neve character? Like when you think of Neve, you want that, harmonic distortion. And like that's the beauty of it. That's, that goes with the name. And he was saying that basically Rupert Neve was kind of moving with the times as parts were coming. And his goal was always to have something very transparent and very clean. But at the time, that's what he could get. That's what's around them, right? And it was not ideal, but that's what it was. So all these designs that we absolutely love are just stuff that, it was put up just because that's what they could get. And I think there's something cool about that too, right? Like,
yeah, all the old Neve stuff I've opened up, like the old Neve stuff is like they got like a circuit board, but then they got like a piece of Vero board with a bunch of shit on it. And it's just like they made it happen. They made shit happen. Like it just didn't, like if there was something that was like missing that the circuit needed, like, in a summing box or anything like that, they just literally went and put it on perf board or Vero board and built it up like right inside the circuit. Damn. That's a lot of work. It's not just like, it's not a prefab circuit board. So, a lot of them seem like one-time layouts. Let's put it that way when you go look at the circuit. So, yeah.
Yeah. At some point they sent me, I was working with Chameleon Labs. I have a couple of like their X mods and I have the older ones and I asked them because they changed owners. So I asked them for the schematics of the original one because they weren't servicing them anymore. And yeah, when I open it and I look at that schematic, I'm like, my God, yeah, there's no, like stuff is just going everywhere. There's cables and wires. Good. It's like, man, there's no rhyme or reason. Like, the new ones, there's like a PCB and everything's very organized and labeled and stuff. And this is just like, just get into the rat's nest and figure out how stuff is connected.
That's funny. Yeah.
But yeah, I can imagine like reverse engineering, like a compressor like that EMI one. It's like, man. I commend you for that. I'm sure it's not easy.
No, it was not. It was just like deciding on, the transformer ratios, the input pad values, all that. That was some of the toughest stuff, even though it sounds simple. There's so many different combinations you can do. So on that, just to get it where you want it, and then I even experimented with just different input pad switches and things like that. But yeah, I think I'm really happy with where it's at. And I think the flexibility of all the, the release, variable attack release, all that, all those values are, very useful because it can get, the original was really, really grabby. So that was like one of the trickiest things. And then of course, noise, like the diodes are tied to noise as opposed to like the 33609 Neve, like diode bridge compressor. You can pretty much throw like, any of that brand diode in there and it's fine. But on the decomp, you throw like, it's very fickle with noise. That's why we had to get the power supply outside of the box too. Yeah.
Right.
Very susceptible to RF as well. So yeah, tricky
Airport
circuit.
signals.
Yeah.
That's fun. What got you into building gear?
I actually was more a musician, playing out a lot, and I got into building pedals and, just building stuff. I didn't have any money, so I just had to teach myself about, like I would rip parts off of boards. I would go digging in the trash for whatever people threw out to grab circuit boards and just grab parts off that. And then it just sort of developed into me learning that way, just sort of by just getting my hands dirty and doing it and building it over and over again, making every mistake you can make. And I just wanted this stuff, wanted the real gear. I stepped into a boutique studio where they didn't have like they didn't have LA2As. They didn't have anything, but they had a bunch of like hand-built boutique gear. Mm-hmm. And got like the best sounding records out of that place. And I was like, oh shit, this is what I want to do, Right then, that was the aha moment. I was like, this is what I want to do. And then I started building, things point to point, and I wasn't afraid to ask stupid questions. People would be like, they would throw shade when I'd ask questions if I didn't sounded like I knew what I was talking about. I just didn't care. I just kept working. I figure if you just work harder than everybody else, you'll get there, So that's what I did. I just kept building the stuff and, learning every little trick, learning that, on the 1969 schematic, there's one capacitor that's in there that's not on the other schematics that'll tank the side chain after a year and a half. Who knew?
Right?
I guess, just stupid shit like that you find when you just get in it and you figure it out. And there's nothing, you can't just, it's experience. You can't, so if you just make yourself experience over time, put the time in, just like with your craft, it's going to eventually come. So it's just a passion. I'm like a geek who just wants to hear this stuff, or, see if I, what it turns out like. I want it for myself, and then I end up not getting it because it's just like goes out the door. It's, that's basically it in a nutshell as far as my motivation. And then it just sort of, I look around after working, doing the same thing every day, and I'm like, oh, that kind of got out of control here. There's a lot of people here.
Best possible way. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's cool, man. That's, it also talks about how much passion you have behind this. And that's what makes a company cool in my eyes.
No, thank you. Yeah. And same, and even Steve's like the best guy. And for him to reach out and be like, yo, you got to talk to Alberto.
Yeah.
I love Steve, man. He's a man. He's been more in Austin because he moved his studio down here. So he's here very often. I feel like almost half the month all the time. So I see him very often now, and it's cool, dude. He's such a good person.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And he was out at NAMM last year as well. Were you out last year with him too? Yeah, nice.
I saw him at NAMM, but we just ran into each other once. But I became closer with him, I don't know, maybe like 4 or 5 months ago.
Yeah. He's such a cool dude, and it looked like he had a blast out there. Like he was staying right there next to the hall, so he didn't have to. That's the place, man, to stay like right there at the Hilton, right there next to it, so you don't have to, because it's madness out there during that time of year. But.
Oh, it is for sure.
So, what current projects are you working on right now, Alberto?
I'm working on a soundtrack for a movie called Bagman. It's pretty cool. It's like a horror movie that Lionsgate's putting out. Should come out September, 9th, I want to say, maybe. A lot of the stuff I do for soundtracks is very last minute, so that's fun. I mix a record for a band called Confess. They're such an incredible band, band from Iran that basically had to get out of the country because the government's after them.
Oh shit!
Oh shit!
Hello.
Oh yeah, dude, check out their history. It's insane. It was such an inspiring thing to work with them because so these
That's
guys
cool.
were in Iran and they basically got arrested because their music they play, it's death metal. And they're very anti Iranian government and they didn't like that. So there's like all these stories of, them facing execution and shit in Iran and so they ended up moving to Europe and they're there. They just made a record that's super cool. I mixed it and I can't wait for that to come out. Crowbot is putting out a record September 13th and they have 2 songs out. That's they're some of my best friends, like super fun to make. It was the first record, so they're self-releasing this one. They're out of labels. So it was like the first record where we had like full creative decisions and we could just go crazy. So there's a lot of fun stuff. We did a lot of like noise interludes in between songs. We had Neil Fallon from Clutch. He did like an intro and kind of like an interlude on one of the songs. Like I don't know, it's a fun record. It's cool. It's all over the place. If you're into guitar riffs, like it's got everything in there. Funky stuff, heavy stuff. Great band.
That's awesome.
What else? I'm working with a guy called O Bummer. He's kind of like hip hop, alternative rock. So I'm working on one of his mixes right now. But yeah, that's
Now you also
all I
do
have on my
production
plate.
too, right?
Yeah.
Are you also a producer, Alberto? You do production
Very
as well?
rarely. I will only do it with like certain people and certain friends. I definitely want to focus more on like the mastering and mixing side of it. But yeah, I mean, if it's the right band, the right record, I love to do it.
Well, good deal.
You have to twist your arm.
Yeah, just a little bit. Well, thank you for taking your time today and joining us.
Yeah, thanks
Yeah.
for inviting me. This is super cool of you guys.
Love your spot too, man. That's kind of very chill.
Yeah. Next time you guys are in Austin, you should come through. So I have
We'll come through in the
console here, some rig, and there's tons of amps and stuff over there.
nice.
shit. Yeah.
It's a bunch of guitars. It's definitely like a guitar player's what's it called? Palace here. There's like so many little stuff to play. There's all sorts of guitars and pedals. There's a wall full of pedals back there. So yeah.
You have to go to Austin
Yeah.
sometime.
We'll do the shoulder seasons, not summer.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
You guys come
wanna
visit
be in the
us.
summer here.
In the winter.
Yeah, come visit us in May.
Right.
Here and or even April. Yeah.
April's a good time.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, my man. And what is your social media handles that people come
So
check
I'm
you out
everywhere
at?
as Alberto Mixes.
Okay.
Make
That's
it easy.
easy.
You don't have to remember my last name. I know it's unpronounceable. So yeah, Alberto Mixes. Nice.
Alberto Mixes.
I like it.
Yeah.
Well, go check out Alberto Mixes.
All right.
Awesome. Thanks, my man.
Thanks so much, guys.